Great. Okay, fantastic. Thanks.
All right. It's always a little daunting when you've got to deal with all the technology here. One of the things that we frequently say about Trinidad and Tobago is that it really is kind of a tropical sampler. It has enough of the kind of iconic tropical birds that everybody likes to see, has parrots and toucans and trogons and all of that, but it's not really overwhelming. Sometimes if your first tropical trip was one to Ecuador or Colombia or somewhere like that, it can really be overwhelming to try and figure out between the 150 different tanagers or hummingbirds that are around, which one you're looking at. So Trinidad is a very manageable trip.
Okay, it's not working. There we go.
There we go.
Just
We think of Trinidad as being Caribbean primarily, but it's really almost South American. It's just right off the coast of Venezuela. And in fact, geologically, it's kind of the end of the Andes Mountains as they dive under the Caribbean Sea. And although it has Caribbean aspects, it also has some very South American aspects to it also, which is very exciting. And one of the nice things about Trinidad, it's small enough that you can cover an awful lot of ground. It's only about the size of Delaware. So from one spot, you can do day trips to most of the island. And that's really nice to be able to just pack and unpack one time and be somewhere. We're going to be in one spot for 5 days and be able to travel to different spots on the island to see some of the different habitats that are found there.
Trinidad does cram an awful lot of different habitats into a relatively small island, and Tobago is different and wonderful in its own way as well as much smaller.
The original name of Trinidad in the Native American language was Land of the Hummingbird, and they do have lots of hummingbirds. How many did you say?
17 species official, yeah.
Which on a small little island like that is quite a few. And since hummingbirds are kind of our thing, we will spend a lot of time watching the hummingbird feeders and talking about hummingbirds. This is a beautiful white-necked Jacobin. And of all the hummingbirds that I have seen, I think the little tufted coquette is probably my favorite. You just couldn't design a more spectacular little hummingbird than this guy. And hopefully we will have chances to spend some time with tufted coquette. So we're going to be based out of Hacienda Jacana or Jacana.
They probably say Jacana.
Probably say Jacana.
One of those to let's call the whole thing off names.
Yeah, and this is a new spot for Sherry and I. We haven't stayed here before, and so we're very excited at the opportunity to have 4 or 5 more cabins. The food is going to be catered, so we're going to be well taken care of, and it's going to have some wetland birds. Hopefully, as the name implies, there's going to be some wattled jacanas around, as well as some of the other water birds. And again, on a relatively small island, you can take day trips from here, and that's what we'll be doing, taking day trips to several of the different habitats and pretty much all the other areas that we have covered on our previous trips to Trinidad, but based out of a different spot. And one of our favorite spots we always go to is Yeret, which is the home of the hummingbird. And
Theo and Gloria Ferguson, this is their home and their yard, and they are hummingbird enthusiasts. Doesn't even begin to tell the story. Theo and Gloria have created a little paradise here mainly for hummingbirds, but for other birds as well. They get a lot of other visitors to their yard, and they get a lot of human visitors to their yard. This is one of the major destinations for birders and even just general travelers. visiting Trinidad. It is a spectacular place with lots of hummingbird feeders, gardens with hummingbird pollinated flowers, and it swarms with hummingbirds at times.
I thought we were crazy about hummingbirds, but I think Theo takes it to a whole nother level.
Definitely.
But it's a wonderful spot to visit, and a great chance to see some of the really spectacular hummingbirds, the blue-chinned sapphire, copper-rumped hummingbird, and the ruby topaz. Theo says it's the most beautiful hummingbird in the world, and I'm not sure I can argue with him. It is as spectacular as any hummingbird anywhere. And you also get a chance there to really have an up close and personal experience with the hummingbirds as well. So it's always a treat to visit Uret and spend an afternoon with their hummingbirds, or a morning with the hummingbirds, as the case may be. A lot of our birding will kind of be along the roadside. Again, we're traveling these highways. I'm glad we're going to have a driver along, because in Trinidad they drive on the wrong side of the road. It scares me to death. But that's
a very, very American centric viewpoint.
Yes, it's the right side of the road for them, but the wrong side for us. But we always have a good driver, and the roads are nice, and actually pass through some really nice habitat. So on our journeys, we'll be stopping in good habitat anytime we see or hear anything, and getting out and wandering around, watching for things like blue-headed parrots or channel-billed toucans or trogons or whatever we might find along the roadside.
We'll be passing through a lot of mountainous habitat, and those roadside stops often give us spectacular panoramas where we can examine the treetops and look for things like parrots and toucans and other birds sitting up in the treetops catching a little bit of sun.
And if you've been on a trip with Sherry and I, or really probably any Naturalist Journeys trip, you know that our interest is not just restricted to birds. We will stop and look at frogs. We will look at wildflowers. We'll look at butterflies. We'll look at everything along the way.
We'll be posting to iNaturalist frequently during this trip as well, as we've done on previous trips. So we'll be contributing to community science in addition to just enjoying all the spectacular wildlife in Trinidad and Tobago.
We've seen a couple of spectacular little lizards, little geckos, and the land crabs that are there. And you just never know what you're going to find. It's always fun to explore a new habitat like this. And a lot of the common birds that we see at feeders at several places along the way, the green honey creeper, Violaceous euphonia, spectacled thrush, kind of like a robin with yellow spectacles on, and the ubiquitous bananaquit that visits the hummingbird feeders everywhere. These are just the common birds that you see almost everywhere you stop, and they're pretty spectacular in their own right. We get excited here in southeastern Arizona about our elegant trogon, but there are a couple of other trogons down there. In fact, I guess there are three species.
Three species.
Here are two of them, the Guyanan trogon and the collared trogon.
There's also the greenback trogon, which is another one of the yellow-bellied trogons.
And they're just one of those quintessential tropical birds.
Anyone who's familiar with our elegant trogon here in southeastern Arizona has spent any time with them. The behavior of these tropical trogons will seem very familiar. They often sit and move their heads very, very slowly and roll their head to look over their shoulder at you.
One day we will visit an agricultural station, which is kind of open fields and all, and actually has some really nice birds. There's some wetlands there, so we see shorebirds like the wattle jacana, never know how to say
We'll go with jacana.
Southern lapwings, kind of a giant killdeer running around. The white-headed marsh tyrant, yellow-hooded blackbird. There's a bird that we don't have a picture of that looks like a meadowlark, except it has a red breast rather than a yellow breast.
And a very dark chocolate brown back. It looks like somebody crossed one of our meadowlarks with a chocolate-covered cherry.
So one of our goals on this trip is going to try and get a decent picture of that red-breasted meadowlark. But the agricultural station can also often be a very good spot for birds. We see some raptors out there, as well as the shorebirds and some of the nice water birds that are found there. And the smooth-billed anis everywhere. These guys just really look like dinosaurs with feathers. You really can see the dinosaur ancestry in birds in these anis, and they can barely fly. They just kind of flutter from one bush and crash into the next one.
They frequently hang out in little mobs, gangs in people's yards, just kind of chilling like this little group that we found in a little village on our way through the northern range in Trinidad.
One of our first trips to the agricultural station, we were lucky enough to find this trio of tropical screech owls just kind of huddled together under a big tree. And again, our local Trinidadian guides are really good at knowing where these things are and picking them out. I'm very impressed with the local guides that we've had there in Trinidad. And we always take advantage of the local knowledge and the local naturalist.
There is a very enthusiastic naturalist and birding community in Trinidad, and that's one of the most rewarding things for us going down there as birders, naturalists, ornithologists up here in the U.S. It's always great to commune with folks who live in a different and spectacularly wonderful environment like Trinidad and Tobago. And we always enjoy interacting with members of the local community, as well as with our professional guides, on whose expertise we rely so much.
Always on the lookout for the little Pygmy Kingfisher. We thought our green kingfisher was small and jewel-like, but this guy is even more so.
That's it doesn't matter unless you're looking at it on your phone. It's going to be larger than life. These guys are tiny. They're only about the size of what a Carolina wren, something like that. Little bitty little things, noisy like kingfishers tend to be. These are a bird that we could find in several different places. One of the places that we've seen them more frequently than others is in the Nariva Swamp area, and that's one of our favorite places to go.
I think they're on the list for Hacienda Jasana.
Oh, wow, that'd be great if they had one in
cabin.
residence. That would be fabulous. Yeah. I see that Naturalist Journeys has posted the eBird species page for the red-breasted blackbird. So check that out. That is a spectacular little bird. And speaking of swamps,
one of the highlights of any trip to Trinidad is going out to see the scarlet ibis
in the Coroni Marsh.
Yeah, the Coroni Marsh. The trip itself, we get there kind of late in the afternoon, and that's by design. And you cruise along these little canals. Sometimes we find a boa constrictor type snake.
Reichenberger's tree boa, like Reichenberger's tree boa.
Boa, silky anteaters sometimes. Lots of wading birds, boat-billed herons and all are possible. But the real stars of the show, when you get out, jump the gun.
Can't forget this guy.
Yeah.
Anyone who's ever done this trip has met these guys, the masked cardinals. There's a little flock of masked cardinals that lives right where the boats take off. And they have learned that tourists are a soft touch. And so they'll come and beg for food. So be sure and save a little bit of cake from lunch or whatever and bring that with you so that they have a little nibble before we take off on the boat. They're funny little moochers, but absolutely the most charming little birds. Masked cardinals, they're actually a tanager. They're not closely related to our northern cardinals. They're actually a tanager, but to me, they look like a Mexican wrestler or a superhero with that mask.
And the stars of the show are the scarlet ibis, and they the boatmen know where they're going to come in and roost in the evening. And being out there in the lagoon with that nice kind of evening light, frequently they bring along a rum punch as well, and you're sitting there sipping your rum punch and watching that nice evening light and seeing the ibis come gliding in. It is a magical experience.
I see Elise is asking chances for silky anteater and other mammals. And yes, we do have chances for silky anteater. We have seen silky anteaters as we're cruising through the mangoes on the way out into the Coroni Marsh for the scarlet ibis experience. But there are a few other mammals that we might encounter, including the little red-rumped agoutis. They can be quite common and tame around some of the better established feeding stations. So that's definitely a possibility.
I think there are possibility at some of our stops for a primate too, for the,
I'm gonna have to have one of our Trinidadians chime in on chat for that one. There are deer on Trinidad, but they are really skittish because they're heavily hunted. We have seen them once, but that's the biggest mammal that we really have, biggest land mammal we have a chance to see, and probably be very lucky to see them. We're more likely to see some of the little
Graham
ones.
replied, red howler
Oh,
monkey
red-
and white-fronted capuchin.
Thank you, Graham. Excellent, outstanding. Appreciate that. Yeah, red howler is a spectacular creature.
On our last trip to the marsh, we also had a nice flock of American flamingos. You don't see them all the time.
It was not only a great sighting, it was a close sighting. We had such great views. It was really thrilling to see.
So that trip alone is worth the price of admission.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely an iconic experience. One of the great nature experiences in the world, I think, to seeing the scarlet ibises come in to roost in the evenings.
And then this is another new spot that for Sherry and I will be visiting Mount Plaisir State Hotel, which is, just forgot the name of the town. Anyway, it's along the beach, which is
That's
will
a
be
beautiful looking
different
beach too.
experience for us. Unfortunately, we're not going to be there at the time of year when the sea turtles are nesting. In the summertime, this is a great place to go see the nesting sea turtles. We're going to be there in the winter, but there'll still be lots to see, including an endemic that we had not seen yet. Again, Sherry and I have been to Trinidad 4 times now. We have yet to see the Trinidad piping guan,
Or Powie.
Powie, and this is a place where they are regularly seen. Grand Riviere, yeah, Martin just
Oh, right, Grand Riviera.
reminded me of where we'll be.
Right.
So we're looking forward again to visiting this new place, seeing some new birds, a little different habitat. So after 4 or 5 nights at
in the forest and
in the
stream
forest,
side habitat, and
we'll spend one
Hacienda
night here
Jacana.
in a completely different spot for us, and that's we're looking forward to that. And from there, we will go back to the airport and take a short little flight over to Tobago. And Trinidad and Tobago are a joint country, but separate islands, and a little separate personality, and somewhat separate.
Culturally different, historically different, but that I think they're complementary, and we certainly love our time on Tobago too.
I have to admit, as much as I love Trinidad, I think the Tobago experience is even more exciting. We'll visit this Main Ridge Forest Reserve. It's the oldest forest reserve in the hemisphere. It's been around since 1776.
Yeah, when America was still fighting its war for independence, in Tobago, they were setting aside vast tracts of forest.
And our naturalist guide here on Tobago, Jason Radix, is probably the finest nature guide I have ever been out with. He is just really nice, and the spot where we're going to be staying is one of my favorite spots.
Joanna is asking what nationalities can join your trip, any from Europe or Canada? We actually already have a Canadian signed up for one of our other trips that's not with Naturalist Journeys.
I think
but
we've had some Canadians along, but
Yeah,
anyone's welcome.
Yeah, anyone is welcome. And that's if there's any logistical issues that non-US citizens and non-US residents need to know, I'm sure our friends at Naturalist Journeys will be able to help you out with that.
One of the kind of comfortable things about Trinidad as far as traveling in the tropics is that being a former British colony, they speak English, all the signs are in English, and also there's not that kind of fish out of water that you feel sometimes when you're in a really foreign habitat. They speak English. Sometimes it's hard to understand English, but I'm sure my English is hard to understand sometimes too. So
mutual unintelligibility at times.
It's a very comfortable place to travel. And again, Tobago is not far from Trinidad, a short flight, 20-minute flight, and an even smaller island, so we can cover both the mountainous parts of the island and also the coastal areas. Gilpin Trace here, we'll take a walk looking for, is it red cap manakins?
Oh, there are several different species that we have a chance to see here, including manakins. The white-tailed Saber Wing is sometimes found along these trails. We see all kinds of very cool things in this forest. It's very tall, classic tropical forest, and quite thrilling to be in. It makes you feel very, very small and humble when you're standing among these enormous trees. It's quite a thrilling place to be, and it's going to be some of our most iconic tropical trail birding. But this is going to be a lot of our really trail-oriented birding is going to be on Tobago. Is going to be done right here.
So we'll travel around the island of Tobago to get to Cuffy River Nature Retreat, which is where we'll be for 2 or 3 nights, I believe. And this is one of my favorite lodges from anywhere we've ever traveled. Good birding right outside the veranda of your rooms, good food, nice people. It's just a wonderful place to be. Lots of good birds. There's bird feeders hanging just 30 yards away from your.
They lay out a gourmet spread for the birds, and it brings in all kinds of things. You can get just absolutely stunningly, critically, knee-bucklingly beautiful views of things like the Trinidad moth, and of course the many species of hummingbirds. And morning and evening are both quite lovely for the photographers. The evening especially, because there's a lot of lovely light in the evenings on the feeders, so it's just spectacular for hummingbird photography in particular.
And we're going to have a very relaxed stay here. And the whole trip is a very relaxed pace. They've got a swimming pool here, and then also a swimming pool at Jasana, I believe. But we'll have time to just relax and take it easy as well. More of the white-necked Jacobin.
The ruby topaz is, the numbers of the ruby topaz tend to build as you get into December. There aren't as many of them in October, November, this time of year, as there will be later in the early part of the winter. So we're looking forward to seeing some of these birds arriving at their location there at Cuffy River. We don't really think of these tropical hummingbirds and other tropical birds as being migratory, but many of them actually are. They do short distance migrations, maybe not more than a few dozen miles, just to get to a little different habitat. But there will be definitely a slightly different group of birds here in early December versus if you were to visit in June or July or in the spring.
And the near endemic we have there is the white-tailed Saber Wing. And that's a big hummingbird. They're easy to find there. The only other place they're found, they're over on the peninsula of Venezuela as well, but hardly anyone goes to Venezuela bird watching anymore. So the best place in the world to see this bird is on Tobago, and they are almost guaranteed. I've learned never to guarantee anything on a nature trip, but they're almost a slam dunk there.
Well, the Saber Wing, and again, this is something that that Graham or Martin can correct me on, but the Saber Wing was pretty much almost wiped out in Tobago by one of the hurricanes, maybe 40 years ago or so. And made a comeback. Either there was a small population that rebuilt itself, or there were immigrants that came over from the Venezuelan mainland to recolonize Tobago. Interesting that they do not occur on Trinidad. This is one of the interesting differences between the two islands. There are some interesting differences in the bird species, as well as some of the other aspects of the islands, and of course the human culture as well, that make it a very diverse experience visiting the two islands. They're named for these broad, flattened primaries of the males. The adult males have these broad, flattened primaries that have a little bit of a waxy sheen to them. And we're still not exactly sure what they do with those. They don't seem to make any sound in flight. The males of some saber wing species do a kind of a wing waving display, but we don't really know much about the purpose of these thickened shafts on these outer primary feathers in the saber wing group of hummingbirds.
Graham mentioned that
Oh.
Hurricane Flora.
Flora in
63.
63. Wow, that's a long time ago. Yeah.
And oddly, the Trinidad motmot is much easier to find on Tobago than it is on Trinidad. And there are motmots all around Cuffy River. If you can't get a good picture of a Trinidad motmot at Cuffy River, then you're not really trying. They are very photogenic and they are everywhere. And if you look carefully, or better yet, have a guide pointed out to you, you'll be walking along and see a stump in the woods. And when you put the spotting scope on it, you find that spot in the woods is not a log at all, but is a common patu.
And we have a chance to see a couple of other night birds as well around Cuffy River. But the common potu that's one of those classic tropical birds with their amazing camouflage.
And the roof-tailed jacamars also nest right there at Cuffy River. And they nest in a hole in the bank like a kingfisher does. And so they're relatively easy to find and a spectacular little bird.
The females have a kind of a rufusy throat and the males have a white throat, I think. But they're both brilliant iridescent green on the back with that long bill. And it would be easy for someone who's not familiar with hummingbirds to think they might be looking at a hummingbird. Except that they're huge, they're enormous compared to a hummingbird. They're good sized little guys. Also very charming like the motmots.
And one of the highlights of our stay in Tobago is a trip over to the coast. I don't know if we'll be stopping at this particular restaurant on this trip, but it's just an indication of how Trinidad and Tobago have embraced ecotourism and bird watching. We feel very welcome there. You don't feel like an oddball at all walking around with your binoculars.
Yeah.
But we will take a trip out to Little Tobago Island, which is just, I don't know, half-mile off the coast.
Very closer than that, I think.
And it's an area that has seabirds nesting there, in particular the red-billed tropic bird and brown noddy. And we climb up to the top of the island, and so you're looking down on these seabirds soaring around below you. It's a really unique experience.
It's a spectacular experience. These little islands are volcanic, and they're black and craggy, and the slopes are covered with dense shrubby vegetation and cacti. And these seabirds, the terns, the tropic birds, boobies, a couple of species of boobies as well. They nest in amongst all of this very forbidding vegetation on these steep, craggy volcanic slopes. It's again one of those iconic destinations, and really thrilling. I noticed that Karen is asking, what's the weather like this time of year? It is in the tropics, but because of the ocean influence, Trinidad and Tobago are not just blazingly hot like it can be in some more inland locations. It's going to be humid, but the temperatures are going to be like early summer temperatures for a lot of us here in North America. Temperatures probably mostly in the 80s. With the nights cooling off a bit because of the humidity, they won't cool off as much as they would say out here in the desert Southwest. But definitely layers are good, so that, and especially having rain gear, because there's always the possibility of rain in the humid tropics.
And the trip over to Little Tobago Island on this boat, this is a glass bottom boat, and we pass over a reef formation and see lots of really colorful tropical fish.
Parrotfish.
We've seen sea turtles from the glass bottom boat. So it's fun just getting out to the island, and then the island itself is really special. So we are really excited about the prospect of returning to Trinidad and Tobago this year, and would love to have any of you come along.
So we've got December weather in Trinidad and Tobago. Daily high temperatures are around 86, rarely falling below 83 or exceeding 90. Daily low temperatures around 73, rarely falling below 70 or exceeding 76. So that's actually in a fairly comfortable range. And, especially wearing, lightweight travel type clothing, that'll make it relatively comfortable compared to some of the places we've been where it can be either, blazingly hot in some inland locations or close to the equator, or ridiculously cold up in the very, very high elevations like up in the Andes.
Okay, I had a question. We have a question of whether the UK style electrical power adapter works there. That's going to be something that
We'll may have to take that up directly with our lodging operators, because I'm not sure what power they have available and what sort of plugs they have, what kind of outlets they have. Oil birds, I don't know that we have an opportunity for oil birds on this trip. Our traditional oil bird location is at Acer Wright Nature Center, and of course Acer Wright has a few issues, so I'm not sure whether there's another oil bird location we'll be able to visit. But
we do still have openings. In fact, we have.
I think we've got 4 or 5 spaces left.
Yeah, we have 5 spaces as of last week. So. And I think we need 10 for both Sherry and I to come along. So we need 5 more people to sign up for me to get to go. Snorkeling opportunities, they talked about snorkeling opportunities from the glass bottom ocean. We have not actually availed ourselves of those opportunities on our previous trips. It somewhat depends on the choppiness of the
we have had days when there was a little bit of wind and there was a little choppiness to the water that actually it stirred up a little bit of silt and made visibility through the glass bottom.
So I wouldn't.
Oh, good. Martin says USA type plugs.
I wouldn't count on snorkeling. It's possible, and we'll see if we can accommodate that. But and you can certainly snorkel right around where the boat leaves, right there at the pier, and see some things. But I don't know if we'll be able to snorkel on the reef or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'll need to bring a converter for UK electrical stuff.
Yeah. Now we got another question from Adele about what city flying in and out of, and actually this trip has us flying into Port of Spain, into the Piarco Airport of Port of Spain, and out from Tobago. So you'll want to make your reservations accordingly. I mean, you could take a commuter back to Port of Spain and fly out from there if you just wanted to do a round trip. But the exit airport for the trip will officially end on Tobago, and we will not be returning as a group to Trinidad. So that's something that again, you can confer with the good folks at Naturalist Journeys about how to make those arrangements. And they will send out information in the info packet for the trip on what you need as far as converters and things like that, as well as packing list and all. If this is your first trip to the tropics, you definitely want to review the packing list and see what kinds of clothing are recommended. I always like quick dry stuff that's lightweight. Anything that's got a little bit of texture or crinkle texture that'll stand up off your skin is good, since it is perennially humid and it can be a little bit sweaty in times.
And a question, if the bird species in Trinidad and Tobago are also found in Guyana. I'm sure there's a lot of overlap both ways, but there are going to be birds in Guyana that you don't find in Trinidad and Tobago, and there are going to be a few birds on Trinidad and Tobago that you're not going to find.
Yeah. Oh, and Adele's question was actually, what city do you fly from the U.S.? And Miami and Houston are I believe the two that are most convenient for most travelers. Oh, about how many species? Oh, gosh.
Well, this is a new itinerary for us, but
Which may actually bump the species up a little bit, since we'll spend more time birding and less time traveling, I think.
And I haven't seen Naturalist Journeys species list for the trips in the last year or so. So I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
Martin, can you chime in and tell us what we might be able to expect?
Why don't you unmute Martin? Okay. So Naturalist Journeys says Qatar Airways, Caribbean Airlines, American Airlines, JetBlue, Iberia, and United all fly nonstop to Trinidad and Tobago. So that's a pretty good range of choices. Most U.S. flights from Miami, that's where we have flown out of.
The inter-island flight is covered in the trip fee.
Yes. Yeah. But only the one. If you want to get back to Trinidad to fly out from Port of Spain, you'll need to cover that on your own.
I think we do go to the Bonaccord ponds on Tobago.
Yeah,
and they're
those are fun.
often really good.
Oh yeah, those are fun. There's lots of cool stuff there.
Okay, recent January trip had 200 species.
Nice, excellent, very good. Very good, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say that Pat says a few years ago we had 170 on TNT. That sounds about like what we had the last couple of trips. It does vary a little bit because there are some birds that do move around again from season to season. So a June-July trip is going to be a little different from a December-January trip. But of course, on the December-January trips, we have some of our northern migrants that are down in the tropics. So that kind of adds to the list. And for those of us from the Western US that don't get a chance to see some of those Eastern birds, it ends up being kind of cool having an opportunity to maybe spot a traveler from the Eastern US or Canada.
Question about drinking water, and bottled water is always provided. The tap water is probably okay, but
you'll always have access to bottled or filtered water.
Almost any trip.
Yeah. If you can bring along one of those little kind of plunger style filters, that's a good thing to do to refill a personal water bottle, and bring along something like hydrogen peroxide or something that you can use to sanitize that bottle. That's what I like to do on trips, rather than add to the plastic waste stream constantly with bottled water, bottle after bottle. Okay, we're scrolling through some more of the messages. Is that it? So we're very excited about this trip. It's obviously it's been a while since most of us have had a chance to do any long distance traveling with COVID, but we're very much looking forward to getting back and seeing some old friends, both avian friends and human friends, and seeing some of these new places and getting to know some new spots in a place that's already very dear to our hearts.
Yes, we will be e-birding the trip species.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Probably iNaturalist in everything we see.
Yeah. Well, we may have to add a special project on iNaturalist as well, just for our trip too. So, but yes, we'll definitely keep everybody up to date on that. That's one of the things that if you join up with the trip, we can get your eBird ID and make sure that you are included in every checklist that we post. There obviously will be times when we can't post from the road, but we'll be able to post from Wi-Fi when we get back to our lodge. So hopefully we'll have a chance to keep up with those eBird checklists. All right. Well, thanks to everybody for being here. Everyone. We're so excited to have everybody come, and thanks to Naturalist Journeys for having us on. It's always a thrill for us to talk about a place like this, and it warms my heart thinking about all these wonderful creatures and wonderful people that we're going to have a chance to see again in December. And we do hope to see some of you joining us on this wonderful, wonderful trip. And hi, especially to Martin and Graham for coming in and for helping us out with the chat. We appreciate that. And
yes, we're going to have some night birding for paraque and frogs and things.
Yeah. Oh, great. That's fantastic. Yeah. Very nice. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody again for joining. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your attention, and thanks again to Naturalist Journeys for hosting this trip, asking us to lead it, and hosting the Zoom so that we could share it with everybody. All right. Is that it? All right. Well, we'll sign off now, and happy birding, everybody, and we'll look forward maybe to seeing some of you in Trinidad. Bye, Martin. Bye, Graham. We'll see ya.